everyone doing? All right, that's the kind of energy I like. Okay, so we have an amazing panel here today, pretty incredible women. I'm excited for all of you to hear from them. So I'm just gonna do some quick intros so you get to know them. We have here Gabi Gregg, who, yes, woo! Gabi is a fashion designer and influencer, best known as Gabi Fresh on social media. Follow her. Gabi's mission is to not just encourage women of all sizes and cultures to feel beautiful, but to create a movement of body positivity and unapologetic confidence. And that's exactly what she did in 2012 when she ignited a viral craze with her quote-unquote fatkini photo shoot, which led to a 5+ year design partnership with Swimsuits for All. Additionally, Gabi launched a fashion-forward plus-size clothing line called Prem with a fellow influencer and friend, Nicolette Mason. Thank you, Gabi, for being here with us. Next up, we have Chidi Cohen. She's a doula, educator, and author, and she's also the co-founder and CEO of LOOM. LOOM provides, woo, yes. You have some fans in the audience, I like that.
I'll take it.
So LOOM provides empowered education on everything from periods to parenting, and she's very passionate about helping people cultivate body literacy and the tools to advocate for their reproductive health and well-being. She has guided thousands of people in their transition from pregnancy to parenthood in her practice and through her book, Nurture, A Modern Guide to Pregnancy, Birth, and Early Motherhood. Thank you, Erica, for being here with us. And last but not least, we have Beatriz Acevedo. She's a cultural strategist, thought leader, and entrepreneur, and she's the former president and founding partner of Me Too, a leading, woo, yes! Me Too is a leading digital media brand for young Latinos in the US, and under her leadership, she went on to raise $50 million in funding, led by some of the most successful venture capital groups in California. She is currently president of the Acevedo Foundation, which provides scholarships for students who lack the financial means to pursue a higher education. Thank you, Beatriz, for being here with us. All right, so I'm excited for our conversation here. I know that we have some very ambitious women here in the audience because otherwise you would not be here, right? You all have dreams, and so many of you have told us here at Girlboss about how you want to scale your side hustle, right? You have dreams of launching your own company, and we have 3 amazing women here who've done that. So we're just gonna cut to the chase and get real about what it's actually like to be an entrepreneur. I know, right? It's kind of like,
take a deep breath.
Deep breath. Okay.
Any breath.
Because it's a glamorous lifestyle from the outside looking in, but once you're in it, not always the case. But just to start us off, let's talk about the word entrepreneur, right? So when we think about the word entrepreneur, there's this image, right? At least in my mind, that comes, it's often that of like a cis white man in a business suit, or we think about the talking heads who populate the screens on CNBC, or maybe like the tycoons of Silicon Valley. But like that's obviously not the sole definition of an entrepreneur. So prior to starting your own journey, what image did you have in mind of like who an entrepreneur was, and how has that image squared with reality?
Great question. I mean, I think for me, growing up, I definitely had an image similar to the one you just described. But as I became an adult, I feel super lucky that I've surrounded myself with extremely powerful women who have similar dreams to me in the sense that they've always wanted to run their own businesses as well. So as I became older and started doing more in the fashion space, I met so many other fashion designers and so many other influencers who were starting their own brands. And really, it became more realistic for me to pursue something similar as well. And I looked to women like Sophia or like Emily Weiss of Glossier, and to see what they've built under their names has been super inspiring, and it just made it feel a little bit more realistic, a little more palpable as like somebody who has similar aspirations. And so it didn't seem so far-fetched. I actually don't know any cis white entrepreneurs, male entrepreneurs, like in my personal social circle. So I feel extremely supported and lucky that I've been able to surround myself like women on this panel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me, so I'm first generation Nigerian American. My parents came over here kind of in the late 70s. My dad is a endocrinologist, he's a doctor. And, you know, I grew up watching him be pretty entrepreneurial, although he was a physician and you could work in a hospital. He started his own private practice and really worked tirelessly to build that. And I definitely grew up in a home. My mom's a nurse, and similar thing, just seeing that like work ethic was really important and seeing them like build something from nothing. So I definitely grew up with that kind of archetype very close by and understood like if you kind of, you know, go in a different direction and like just stay super focused, like here's what you can achieve. And my parents definitely kind of pushed that narrative, although like my family of origin is very complicated, but that was one of the great things I was able to pull from that. In terms of my own, you know, grafting and who I was looking at beyond that, very similar, I think, to Gabi, you know, looking at people like Sophia and Emily and Audrey Gelman, people who were like starting to create these businesses. I think really gave me this feeling, okay, you can go and do that. Not to be totally cliche, but I think Oprah is definitely someone that you're just like,
We all love Oprah.
I mean, we really love her. But I think I feel lucky that although you have mentioned that the archetype can be cis white men, I was never distracted by that. And I kind of was looking to my family and then also looking to these other people that felt like me in some way to kind of propel me towards that goal.
For me, it was very much by accident. I'm a Latina, so I think I have side hustle in my veins.
Yes.
But I didn't really think, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. But I did have a business or a solopreneur business when I was 8, 9 years old. And I would make cookies and no-bake pies and sell them near where my father had his practice after school. On the weekends, I had another side hustle. I was a very good gymnast. So whenever my parents had people over, typical Sunday carne asada, there's a lot of people there, potential investors. I do my little like gymnastic stuff, and then I would pass this little round thing where my mom would put the tortillas, so to give me some money, right, for like my performance. So I started seed funding, friends and family round back then when I was 8. And I continued, you know, when I was in high school, I would teach cooking classes to my friends. I would do homework for a fee, you know. So I think I always had that sort of like side hustle in me. Officially, I didn't become an entrepreneur until I lost my job in my mid-20s. I used to be a TV host and producer and writer in Mexico City. And one day I got this notification that all my shows were canceled out of nowhere. That's a long story, but it needs some alcohol for me to tell you the whole story. But I'm incredibly grateful. Those are the first big sort of setback in a way, but I was very content, you know, introducing music videos in my 20s, never thinking what's next in my life. I just thought I'd have this job forever, and the day I lost my job and had no way to pay for my rent for the next month, I became an entrepreneur and launched a production company in my apartment, obviously. I was the only employee. So I never thought of becoming an entrepreneur. I became one by default, and then eventually moved to the US, and very proud immigrant entrepreneur here who come to not steal jobs, but create jobs and opportunities. So.
You know, on Girlboss Radio, when we have entrepreneurs on, you know, we've heard these stories about accidental entrepreneurs like yourself, right? Who just, you find yourself in this situation and you make it work. I'm wondering for all of you, was there ever a moment where you were like, okay, I can do this and I have to be the one to start this? When it comes to your business.
Oh, yeah, I still am feeling that even now. I think what's been really interesting with Loom is we've gone through a lot of kind of brand ID iterations, you know, like when Quinn and I started the business or concepted it, we were like, it really bothered us how compartmentalized everything was, how like you couldn't talk about periods and pregnancy and sex and abortion and miscarriage and parenting. Like there just wasn't anywhere that was bringing all of those things together. And I think for the two of us, we were like, we've either mutually experienced these events or supported someone around that. And we really felt that it's on a continuum, and we need to like bring all of those things into the same space. And I think for us, we were like, I think we're the only people that can do this. Like there isn't anyone else who can make people feel more comfortable that it's okay to talk about abortion and also talk about fertility in the same space. Like nothing is cannibalized by that. In fact, it's like you are freed by being able to be in both of those places. So I think when we first started the business, it was very much, we wanted to kind of be in the wellness or well-being space because that was very much what was in vogue in the zeitgeist at the time, and it just seemed like where things fit, especially being a doula and educator for so long. But I think, cut to now, what feels very clear is that our focus is health education and empowering people around understanding their bodies and having empathy and advocacy for themselves within these different experiences. And I just know that like right now, like we're the only people who can do that, and I think we need it now more than ever.
Absolutely. It sounds like you saw this need, right? You saw that there was this disconnect, and you're like, okay, I can fill this gap. Was that the same case?
100%. And I was just going to say something I've really noticed in this space is that often women, including the three of us on the stage, come from a personal experience, right? We're frustrated with something in our personal lives, and that kind of drives our desire to create something to change the world, essentially. And so I don't always see that with male entrepreneurs. I see more of like a business mind, like, oh my God, how can I make the most money? What's the next thing on the horizon? What's the next tech, the big innovation? Whereas we are just like, I just want to get dressed, and why don't I have options? Like, this is crazy. And so for me, I started as an influencer before the word was a word. So I started in 2008, pre-Instagram, pre-social media, just as someone who wanted to share resources and connect community around being a plus-size young woman and not really seeing anything that worked for me. And things grew really organically from there. Obviously, we now know body positivity is very mainstream, et cetera, but at the time, it was really new. So it kind of snowballed, and as I became kind of someone known in the space, I saw a lot of progress in some ways, but ultimately still felt extremely frustrated that I could not really express my ideal personal style through the options available in the market. And so a friend of mine who you mentioned, Nicolette Mason, is another influencer who was at Marie Claire while I was at InStyle magazine. And as an editor there, I had my own page, which seems amazing, but I was even frustrated as an editor because I was supposed to put this page together and I couldn't find anything I liked to put in the magazine. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, I have this opportunity, my face is on this magazine, and I literally don't feel proud of it because the stuff I had, the options I had to put on the page were like really abysmal and very matronly, didn't reflect my personal style. And so I left the magazine to pursue starting my own fashion line.
Yeah, same for me, I think, those insights that are so invaluable of solving for a very personal pain point.
Yes.
So for me, when I moved to the US in my early 20s, I would take meetings with networks and studios. I was a TV producer before my digital media entrepreneur career. And the presidents of the networks and the studios would tell me, oh, they can't find the Latinos. They can't find the talented Latinos. In a city like Los Angeles, or 50% of the population, mind you.
This doesn't square.
Yeah, it's a little strange. So then I would go back to my office, and then I had like a long list of people waiting to talk to me to see if I could connect them, help them out. Incredibly talented, brilliant, now many of them very famous. And I just couldn't understand that broken bridge. So for me, the whole Hollywood system that continues to be broken, obviously we know that, of nobody can get in if you don't have tremendous background in it, and you're a showrunner. You're like, but how is anybody gonna be a showrunner if you never give them an opportunity? So my big insight at the time was I had produced a series for Warner Brothers and director Bryan Singer that was a digital series called H+, and it was the very first thing that looked like a movie on YouTube. And I saw how easy it was, because obviously the budgets were nowhere near a real movie, how I could break in new talent into digital. So I thought, oh wow, this is my way to hack all this next generation into Hollywood. I was in because I had won Emmys, so I was one of the few people in the list, but I'm like, how do I bring everyone else in? It was very hard for me. So on digital, I was able to do that with this series, and I thought, wow, this is it for me. I'm never going to go back to TV. I think digital is the place where we could really now finally tell our stories, bring new voices, new filmmakers, and try to change that narrative that's been so painful for our communities when it comes to stereotyping who we are. So trying to solve for that pain point is exactly why I started Me Too. And I wanted to do two things in parallel. One, obviously open the door to this next generation of filmmakers. And the other one was for a whole young generation, including my twins, Isabela and Diego, and Isabella's here somewhere. I wanted them to be very proud and to see themselves represented. And, you know, people thought, well, you guys already have Univision and Telemundo. I'm like, yeah, no, but that's not what we consume. We consume more digital than anyone. We're nowhere to be found in digital, and there's no content in English that's culturally relevant. So I wanted to build a platform that was in English, that was for US-born Latinos, and that really built that community of like-minded people that felt very, very proud to see themselves in a very authentic way, and invited, and that they belong in their own country. I mean, it's crazy to think how, you know, our communities are really driving growth in this country, yet we continue to be so invisible. So for me, it was very, very personal. I wanted not just my kids, but another generation to feel proud of where they come from and to know that they're more because of who they are and not less.
I love that. Thank you. What I'm hearing from all of you is that you are essentially problem solvers, right? Like you saw that there was a problem and you went about a solution and you were like, I'm gonna be the one to fix this. But from the outside, I wanna get back to this idea of being an entrepreneur and being your own boss, right? Like there's a lot of talk about it in terms of, you know, it can seem very glamorous, right? Like who wants to work for other people when you can be your own boss, right? But like obviously when you're an entrepreneur, you still have potential investors to, you know, talk to, respond to, and you might have a board of directors who's watching everything that you do. So what do we get wrong and right about being an entrepreneur, a founder, a co-founder? Help us break down some of the myths here.
Such a big question.
How much time do you have?
Maybe what are some
I
of
feel like
the
you should,
common
I don't have a board of directors.
misconceptions?
But
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I love it. Even the misperception of when you're raising funding, right? And even the introduction of she's raised all this money. Even my own mother gets scared. She's like, oh my gosh, you're going to be kidnapped with all that money they gave you. I'm like, no, the money they didn't give it to me. I put it all back into the company. Yeah, I mean, being your own boss is not as glamorous as it sounds, even when you have not raised money. I mean, in my old days as an independent TV producer, my bosses became every single client that I had at a network. And they all have very different personalities, very different styles. When you have one boss, good or bad, at least you kind of learn how to work around him or her. But with each project, there's a different boss. So you can't really think that if your goal is to not have a boss, you're going to become independent or an entrepreneur, because that's really not going to happen. You really need to know how to navigate, read people, you know, so that's definitely not going to happen. As you raise money, money's not free, right? Like it comes with a price. And the more money you raise, the bigger price you pay. So obviously now you have to answer to a lot of investors. You have to answer to a board. You have to, and everyone has a very different opinion. And it doesn't get easier, right? As there's so much pressure for the company to grow, to generate more money, to have a bigger audience, it's tough. I mean, I wouldn't say I wouldn't do it again. I did say I wouldn't do it again, and now I'm like thinking of 2 other companies. But it's tough. It gets very tough, and I wish somebody, you know, really broke it down for you, because you maybe see our Instagram feeds and they're like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. You got the blue check next to your name and you're always traveling and speaking around the world. And yes, you do live incredibly fulfilling experiences and you meet amazing people, but there's also a lot of hard work, you know, a lot of time where you doubt yourself, if you're doing the right thing, if you're good enough, a comment that somebody makes from your investor and your boards about some decision you made or your performance makes you feel very, 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 very small, no matter how much swagger you have. So you have to be prepared to be able to stomach that, right? To know, and I think that is exactly where, when you are solving for a problem that is bigger than you, that has a mission that is so big, you're able to keep at it. If it's just for the money, it'll probably crush you. It is very hard. But if there's a mission, if there's something that is so big that you're like, it's worth it, and there's a lot of prices that you pay, obviously, right? I think from the three of us, I'm the only one who has kids. So my kids were very little when I started Me Too. They were 6 years old. Now they're going into high school. And they absolutely hated Me Too. You know, they would just see people in caps or hoodies, and they'd be like, ugh, rolling their eyes, because that was the enemy that took their mom away. You know, that's the enemy company and brand that has her working long hours or taking trips or not making it into their music performances or their dance recitals. And it's really crushing when they tell you, why can't you be like all the other moms and just pick us up at school? So as much money as you raise, as many covers as you get in Fast Company and the New York Times, it breaks your heart. Your heart bleeds so hard of thinking, oh wow, there's this perception that my life is so extraordinary. And I have to say, I do have a very blessed life, but you doubt yourself if you're putting your time in the right place, and you know that that time you're never going to make it back.
I mean, I totally resonate with that. I mean, in the sense that Loom, we're pre-seed. We haven't gone out for fundraising yet, but we will be towards the end of the year. And I think the two things that just really rang true for me when you were speaking is that, one, I work 24 hours a day in a lot of ways. When you're your own boss, there is no off button. Right. You're constantly thinking about what the next thing is. You're problem solving, and I'm managing so many people all the time, and also the space that we're in is so intimate because we're dealing with people's bodies, we're dealing with these very emotional experiences, and so there's not a lot of softness, even though like my baseline kind of encouragement to everyone is to find that gentle spot to take care of yourself and all of that. And so, you know, I really, really get that. And again, it's like, you know, the blue check next to your name and like the article in this magazine or whatever. It's like, yes, that stuff is really wonderful, but there is a personal price to that. I mean, you know, right now for you, it's your children. But like for me, it definitely has been like my own relationship, with my partner, my friendships as well, just not being able to show up in the way that I would really, really, really love to, because the mission of what we're trying to do with Loom is to really help people feel like they are able to take care of themselves, and especially for female identifying people and people that have uteruses, that they're able to advocate for their own reproductive health, and how important that is. And that mission is so strong that it just always is like my due north. And not to say that it's going to, eat up my entire personal life, but it really does keep me driven. And it's not, for me, it isn't about the money. Like, yes, there is money and it's coming and all of that, but the focus really is I want to change the landscape. And when you know that, it is the thing that wakes you up in the morning. It is the thing that makes you feel like I can't go to that wedding. I can't go to that, and also being a doula for almost a decade. I mean, I'm retiring at the end of this year, and I have like 2 or 3 births left. I mean, I just did a birth 2 days ago. That lifestyle as well of just being like, when you're on call.
On call, yeah, that's crazy.
If you have a relationship with me, you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to see Erica because she's on call, and like I'll have like half a glass of wine at dinner. I make sure I go to bed at a certain time. Like for years, I've been in service, and it doesn't stop, And so I just think, there is that glamorous component of it. And actually, the thing I want to say too about the glamorous component, I think we're all, POC women here, and in the sense that we have to have joy. We have to have, I need to have a nice dinner, or I need to go on a trip to be alive, And I think you have to resist this grind in some way, shape, or form. So I do feel like that's important. And so I don't think the glamour shouldn't be there and shouldn't be advertised as a part of like what this journey can be like. And I think it's important for women of color to have that, but at the same time, it's really hard.
Yeah. What do you do to recharge? Because you're talking about these like difficult moments,
Yeah.
right? But there's also, you have to make time for that joy,
here's what
and you
I
have to make time to recharge.
I will, and I'll be very quick in what I'll say about this, is that I feel like the only thing that's like kept me alive, really, especially as someone who's experienced lots of trauma and had a lot of different types of adversity, is being very aggressive about my self-care. Like, it's not really negotiable. It's like, and I also feel like for women especially, there's this myth of balance, like, you just got to find that work-life balance. And I'm like, that
Does not exist.
does not exist. Yeah. And I just feel like it's not about balance, it's about intensity at both ends. All of us love what we do, right? So all of us love what we do, and so it's like, you're gonna work really hard, and then I'm also gonna take care of myself really hard, and somehow with that, you find some type of equilibrium. I mean, it means I have to go to therapy, I have to go to acupuncture, I have to also not be scheduled. Like, there's one day of the week at least where there's nothing on my calendar, because you can't survive if you're just constantly
That's amazing.
outputting.
Yeah.
And I have not done that.
One day.
That from
No, and it's
One day.
It's the burnout has been real, like
Yeah.
extremely real, to the point where like you do hit a wall. Like I'm so lucky I have a co-founder, because we both have hit those walls at different times. And there are some, like, it's happened recently where I'm just like, I can't get out of bed right now because like my brain doesn't work. And like when you go and you don't take that time for yourself, I would cancel therapy week after week after week, because I'd be traveling or working just like crazy hours, and like that would go to the bottom of my list because I didn't feel like it was essential. But like, had I actually gone, maybe I wouldn't have hit this wall, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it's so important to now make sure to incorporate that into my life, and now I'm like making so much more of a priority out of self-care.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just going back to something that you mentioned earlier about, like, as a Latina woman, you feel like you have a side hustle in your veins. I also think a lot about just intergenerational kind of trauma and intensity. I mean, I think for people that are extremely driven, I always am thinking, and again, this might be very subjective, but I know that a big part of why I am so driven comes from all of the challenges that I've come from, and that my productivity and drive is a way of like somehow like running away from a lot of that. And so when I'm like, for you, when you're saying you're canceling therapy week after week and you're just focusing on the output and the work, it's like that is the behavior that like we have to collectively work. And that's what I mean when we talk about self-care and I'm taking care of myself. It's like we have to move from self-care to community care. Like, there has to be this feeling of like, right? Like, if you aren't taking care of yourself, like, I mean, I need to be accountable to you too, and say you need to, especially when you look like us and you live in these bodies. Like, we have to like make space for that for each other,
Great point.
We often hear how, to be an entrepreneur and to do, to bring your vision to fruition, you have to make some quote unquote sacrifices along the way, right? Those sacrifices can be small and big, but what is a sacrifice for one person, or what seems like a sacrifice to one person, can be a non-starter to somebody else, or it can just not even be an issue at all to someone else. I'm wondering, how have you gone about in your career assessing the non-negotiables and what you can be flexible on? Like, do you have a framework, a system, or a checklist that you go through to determine that?
I don't have a system, but I guess just the way, from our culture as we're wired and how we grew up, for me, family comes first. So that's definitely a non-negotiable. Even when work, I'm like, okay, I will miss this. My husband will be there. I went to 4, dance recitals. I'll miss 1. So family definitely first. I'm in a different place between teenage kids and aging parents as well. My mother now lives with me. My father was very ill 2 years ago and eventually passed away. And he was just like my biggest mentor and just love of my life. And it was very hard. But whenever he had a surgery, even if I had an investor meeting, I would take a red-eye from New York. I'd be there in the surgery. I stay with him in the hospital to the final days. And I don't regret that. But then that had the price of I come last. So family first, work second, mentoring third, me last. And it's tough, right? Because you're exhausted, you're So for me now that I'm not in the weeds of running Me Too every day, I've gotten better at non-negotiable is my meditation, for example, that I never did. But I know that that keeps me sane, boosts me up. And I'm trying to little by little not pack my calendar, although my calendar has colors minute by minute starting at 6 a.m. And I'm not great. That's something I definitely have to learn. But I would say I need to learn how to move myself up on the list. But for me, constant, though I'm very driven and I think I show up always for work and I'm very committed and professional, my family has always come first.
Yeah, I'm still learning. So Prem is a very new company, and I put work first always. So I'm constantly prioritizing work. And what I found, obviously, is there are sacrifices that come along with that. And I have been, for instance, my relationship, I was with my ex for 9 years, and we recently broke up. A big part of that was just because of the amount of time I could not give to him. And just the amount of work I was doing, I just did not put work into the relationship. I mean, that's not the only thing, but part of it. And then not prioritizing friendships, I haven't been prioritizing my family. I didn't see my family last Christmas or last Thanksgiving. My mom's getting older, she's 72, so I'm really in a place in my life now where I'm reassessing what is important to me. Obviously, all of these things are important to me, my family and my business and myself, but putting work first constantly is not working. So I have to really figure out that, what kind of life do I want to live? What do I find valuable? What are the things that I can't get back, right? When you were seeing your father. And so I'm really making more of an effort this year to prioritize the things that are invaluable and that, I can take a day off a week or whatever and go to therapy and do the things that are important, even if that means not being the quote-unquote best
But
on
I
paper.
think a good hack that has helped me recently is thinking that if you are burnt out, you're
Your
not
business
going to
is gonna
perform
suffer.
at your top level.
Exactly.
So even if you're not doing it for you, you think, okay, I'm going to do it for my business.
Right.
Then you're going to need to do those things to be able to. And I grew up, my dad would always tell me, you cannot give what you don't have, right? And so your energy is what everybody wants. Your vision, but if you're exhausted, you're not going to be able to have that. And then what's going to happen? And for many years I thought, and now I see it and I think, you definitely don't make smart decisions when you're exhausted.
Right.
You're definitely not the best at a pitch when you haven't slept, So almost thinking that that's part of work, taking care of yourself. I don't know, it sounds strange,
No, it's
but
100%
it's a mind
true.
trick, you know?
I think it's oftentimes what I will say to my clients over the years and to my team, because I did a lot of birth work for a long time, and I would work with a lot of pregnant people that were, CEOs or actors or celebrities or whatever, and they're very, very driven up with their work. And I would say, why don't we take 10 to 15% of that energy that you put into your work and put it into taking care of yourself. Make that the new thing that you're obsessed with. And that challenge obviously typically would help them kind of shift a lot of the behavior. And I think for me, in terms of what's non-negotiable, I'm very much like Gabi. I'm working on figuring a lot of that out, but I think carving out the space to take care of myself, once a week is super important, and not trying to sneak in a call on a Sunday because I have a little bit of time, just being actually this is a sacred day and I'm just going to take some time off.
Yeah, I love that. Block in time for yourself on your calendar, right? It's something that I think we can all do, but we often don't. So I love that. But of course, there's always, we're talking about these challenges, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, right? Have there been any challenges that, seemed maybe insurmountable in the moment, but in retrospect, were really just short-term problems?
I'm
are these okay, maybe I'm tackling one problem a day and then that's solved, and then it's just moving on to the next issue and problem solving there.
I mean, I think that's just the continuum of having a business. Every day
there
there's little fires,
fires all the time.
Yeah, and then you're kind
Little
of
fires here and there.
But I think what the cool thing is, over time, I think you get better and better at managing that and feeling comfortable with. You get more resilient at the fact that every day there's going to be something. I don't even really think that much about the problems anymore. I just consider them as this is the part of the business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you become good at it. I think going back to the whole mission and vision of a company and why you exist, I think that's why it's very important, because obviously entrepreneurship is never a straight line up. There's a lot of zigzag going around. But sort of like, okay, there's the North Star. How should I solve for this based on where I want to get to? Makes it a little bit easier than if it's all about the bottom line, then there's like massive panic.
I think when I started, I was always panicking. Like every fire seemed like the end of the world because I was not used to running a company, and I didn't realize like this is what happens in a business. Like every customer service issue, I was like, what happened? Like, why is that dress? Like, why was it damaged? Like my mind was blown all the time, and that's just not sustainable, right?
Yeah.
And so as you realize that's part of running a company, and it's really about problem solving, and as opposed to like freaking out over every little thing, that I think has been actually my biggest lesson in running Prem so far, has been like the shift in perception and perspective of like what like problems for me now are just a thing to solve as opposed to something to panic over.
Right.
You mentioned earlier how you kind of fell into entrepreneurship, but I'm wondering, once you all started your own entrepreneurial journey, did you come up with like a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan of where you wanted to be and when? And did that plan, was it just career focused, or were you also thinking about some personal milestones like marriage or kids or anything else that you wanted to include in that?
I mean, when I started, we definitely set out for a 2 and a 5-year plan, which a lot of those milestones we have hit, some of which we haven't, and I think, again, that's just part of the learning curve. But I did not, as you're probably not surprised by now, I did not like include any personal milestones or personal things in there. And I think, again, having this kind of come to Jesus moment recently, where I am like really reevaluating now, including those in my overall plan, so that I'm not leaving this big part of myself out. But it definitely wasn't something I was thinking of at the outset.
Yeah, I mean, I was already married when we started this business, so I didn't really have a strong personal plan in terms of partnership. I think, children is obviously something that I do want. We haven't really figured out what that timeline really looks like. However, I think in terms of a 2-year, 5-year plan, Loom has been so iterative. I think it's only now, besides like actually opening up a physical site, that we're starting to do more of that really long-term planning. And that actually has been pretty soothing, because so much of it initially was a lot of like very clear mission understanding and knowing what we wanted there, but a lot of it was kind of like knee-jerk, try this, try this, try that.
Yeah, I definitely had a very robust 3, 5, 7-year plan, because you need that to raise money. And then you got to check every quarter on your board meetings. So definitely had that. And obviously it's a good practice to have, to see where you want to go and how you're thinking of getting there business-wise. On a more spiritual side of business, I would also say it's very important, and I'm a big believer in like the energy and the universe and visualizing and putting where you want to be all out there in whatever way you do it. So I think that's definitely also very important to really, put yourself, feel how you want to, be in a certain amount, besides having the Excel spreadsheet. Obviously, it's important. For me also, I was already married, had kids, etc. But I had my vision, of like just seeing, my kids older and happy and laughing and healthy. So it wasn't something I put in a written plan, but it was definitely out in the universe, in my heart, in my mind.
Yeah. And I think the exercise of going through the planning that we have had to do on a business end has actually helped me apply those same things to my personal life, right? To have a 5-year plan, to set goals to get to that 5-year plan, because I ultimately I had like little goals for myself, but I didn't have like a larger vision and a mission for my life, and like realizing you could do that really changed my life, I think.
Yeah.
Like, what is my mission, not only as an entrepreneur but as a human being? And so obviously sometimes those come together, but I think you can have that for your personal life as well as your professional life.
We've talked a lot about the challenges, but just what are some of the things that you love most about your role as like a founder and what you do?
I mean, there are so many things I love. It really is fulfilling and rewarding in a way that is hard to explain. I think beyond just, of course, working for yourself, and really, as we talked about, you still have to, of course, have relationships and answer to your clients and all of these things, but it really is amazing to kind of be the one setting the goals and setting the mission for your company. I've loved working with a co-founder. I think it has really helped me to have someone else by my side as we go through the ups and downs. And then ultimately, my favorite thing is definitely just our customers, our followers, hearing firsthand from people how you've changed their lives. I think there's nothing like that. So I think that is, for me, the most fulfilling part.
Yeah, definitely same for me in that, I know over the past few years how much we've helped people through very difficult times in their lives. And also, the two classes I teach at LOOM right now, our periods class and our sex class, and I love people walking in coming from a knowledge deficit, feeling like they don't really understand their own body and they don't know why, or they feel really out of connection with their sexuality and like their own intimate relationship with themselves around sex, and then leaving within 2 hours feeling like, okay, like I really feel like I understand myself better and I want to take these next steps. And so that, just from an educator perspective, is such a beautiful thing to just see that transition happen in a very short period of time, and feeling excited for like where this person is going to go from there. But also just knowing that right now, women's and body, like reproductive health in general, needs like a complete like revamp and like just breakdown, and being a part of that feels really exciting. And also being able to hire really amazing women to be a part of our company is really wonderful too.
Yeah, I think pretty much the same, even though it's a different type of company. But you set out your goal or your vision of what problem you're trying to solve that frustrates you. We've all had them. And then when you get that feedback from the customer, or in our case, the followers, the viewers, just saying, wow, like, I couldn't believe it. When I opened Snapchat and I went into the Discover app, and there's the only one Latinx brand, and that's yours, right? For a 12, 13-year-old girl that would have never seen herself represented there in any other of the other brands, it's priceless. Or when people say, I was so proud of this content that you shared about what it meant to be incarcerated, and how you're still human and how you still deserve a second chance. And I shared it with so many people, and it gave me a whole other vision of what my life could be. So a little bit of that, of how you don't even think about how much what you do impacts people's lives. And I love that. I just love to be able to contribute, even in a very small way, to potentially it's not just one person, but a whole generation to come, because there'll be different type of people than potentially their family with all their struggles. So that just feels incredibly powerful to me.
And just to wrap up, I'm wondering if there's a bit, what's one bit of advice that you'd like to share with like our rally attendees this weekend? What would you want them to carry forward with them as they set out about scaling their side hustles, maybe, launching into starting their own entrepreneurial journey? What bit of advice would you give to them as they start on that?
I would say, even just in the space of just talking this morning, it really is important to center yourself within the trajectory that you're on, and to not forget about yourself, because I know that now very clearly, and I see how much more it benefits my team when I'm actually in a good place. And sometimes when you start a business, you are very comfortable having nothing emotionally, nothing like spiritually. You're just like, I gotta do this for the business. And I think if you can start off being like, I need to be centered, I need to have these tools, I think it will serve you really well in the long term. So it's just finding that softness for yourself in the process, and not forgetting that, I think, is key.
I know, so I'm just going
You're
through
thinking, okay, I'll go. I think, this is the best advice that nobody gave me, but I read it in a book, and it was very recently. I literally opened the book, and there it was. I'm like, the universe, it always shows up that way. And I was going through a tough transition, and I read this piece that said, pain in life is inevitable. And this is for entrepreneurship or for anything else. So, of course, pain in life is inevitable, but as long as you come out of your pain, you don't come out of your pain empty-handed, it will all be worth it. So I think the best advice is to really, any setback, any no, any problem, any panic that you take as a gift with a learning is invaluable.
Yeah.
So take that as a gift, rejection as a gift, a problem as a, because as long as you don't come out empty-handed, it'll all be worth it.
Totally.
I love that.
Oh my God, there's so many. I think from a practical standpoint, not that this is the best thing to end on, but just really doing your research when it comes to things like co-founding, equity, like fundraising.
Super important.
Because I think I was very flippant at the beginning because I was just like, oh, cool, let's start a company. Like I was so passionate about the mission and why it was so important. I didn't think enough about signing the paperwork, and I wish I would have known more 6 years ago about that part, because after you sign, you signed.
That's super important.
Okay, I think we have just 5 minutes for Q&A. Does anybody have any questions for our panelists? Okay, yes.
I'm also a Latina. I'm from Venezuela. And I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. Right now, I'm coaching other women to make their business come to reality. However, I got separated from my husband a year ago after 15 years of marriage. And when I read the personal cost of being an entrepreneur, I wanted to be here to understand a little bit more how you go through these situations. I have always put my family first as well. And I used to do business with my husband our entire marriage. And the second I began to put my energy in a project for myself, everything collapsed. And basically the question is, how can you determine where to slow down or when to not? Because when you have like a passion, as we do, and even though you put family first all the time, sometimes it feels like it's gonna hold you back. And I know how can I would have solved my marriage just slowing down. So what's like the balance there? How can you like find the balance like in those kind of situations? Because like Latino men are also pretty
Machista?
They're machista. I don't know what to say that.
I think there's not an easy answer for that. I think it's a very personal decision, to be honest. I think maybe something that you can try to ask yourself is how happy you are with whatever it is that you're doing. You might think that, oh, if I hadn't started a business, maybe my marriage would have been incredible. I mean, and maybe that was a very high price to pay because you were so fulfilled, so happy, so in love. So yeah, there's where you have to say, well, am I going to trade off all this incredible life for me having a business? And that's a very, that's a decision that nobody's going to be able to make for you. No matter how big the cause, you will always know how happy are you and what's your end game in life, right? For me, is to be happy. For somebody else, is to win, right? I had a co-founder that answered that, and they're like, oh my gosh, you guys will never be able to work together, because it was like, just winning comes first. For me, it's like people come first. And my happiness, at the end of the day, I want to be happy. I want to be proud. I want to... So it's a very personal decision, and you have to really be intuitive with yourself and listen to yourself and, kind of ask for guidance of like, how can you be your best personal self in every sense of the way. There's something I've been reading a lot called like zone of genius that I really love. Like, what's that zone of genius for you, right? It's not like what you've learned to be good at. It's not like it's like, where are you at that feels like breathing, and that's your place. That's why you came into the world. And it takes skill to find it, but working on that is really powerful.
Yeah. Oh my God. And I think in terms of just relationships, the thing I would offer is, if you are currently in a partnership and you feel that partnership is challenged due to the kind of external world you're building outside of that partnership, is to actually ask the partner,
Right.
like, what can I do, what's missing, and really make time for that. Because I would also potentially hypothesize that women in partnerships that are having these really big business lives are probably with partners who are willing to sacrifice quite a lot of themselves to be with that other person, which means there might be a dynamic going on where they have learned to not express their needs. And you have just accepted that dynamic because that's the relationship. And so if you have this, the ability to feel that that shift is happening, that there is this kind of, there's a leakage that's happening in the relationship, like stop and try and find out what it is and see if there's a way for you to meet. Because if there isn't, there isn't. But I think it's just most people miss that timeline to really be able to talk and repair, and sometimes it's just too late.
Thank you for that. I think we're all out of time, but if you do have any questions, maybe we can connect after the panel. Thank you, ladies,
Thank you,
so
guys.
much for this conversation. I appreciate you being here.
Hey.